There you go. Hang on. All right. Magandang gabi. Ako po si Trixie Cruz-Angeles. Ito po ang Luminous. Medyo may migraine pa po tayong konti. Hindi pa tumatalab yung gamot. So medyo maikli yung ano natin ngayon. But still, we did promise ay Sutil Sunday. So we're going to talk about cases kasi yun po yung nasa ano natin nasa announcement natin today. So the three cases that we looked at, the Marcos cases, DJ Loonie, which I did not follow originally, but I had to read up on, and of course the Duque case. But then you can also ask questions. Uh, you can also ask questions later on. Naririnig niyo na ba ako? Are we already online? I mean, nakikita niyo na po ako sa screen niyo. And please let me know how the audio is. Yay. Mini Sutil Sunday, sabi ni Ma'am Pinay Paparazzi. All right. Marcos cases. The reason I'm talking about the Marcos cases is because there are so many fallacies going around. Unang-una, we posted about, kasi gagamitin yan alam naman natin na tumatakbo po si Ginoong Bongbong Marcos at gagamitin against him yung mga issues tungkol sa kanyang mga magulang and of course yung ibang mga kaso na inihain ng Presidential Commission on Good Government. Ngayon may umiikot na kasabihan na wala daw sa mga Marcos cases, walang mga Marcos cases or walang mga Marcos na na-convict dun sa ano. So, sabi ng Rappler, itong sinasabi ng mga tao na walang Marcos daw na na-convict ay hindi totoo, supposedly fake news, kasi na-convict daw si Mrs. Marcos before of the PGH cases, and then, pero na-acquit siya in the Supreme Court, which for me is slightly devious, kumbaga. Para silang Vera files, sinasabi nila na hindi na-convict sila pero na-acquit ng Supreme Court. In other words, na-convict sila si Mrs. Marcos in the regional trial court pero she was acquitted later on by the Supreme Court. Which means hindi siya na-convict by final judgment. The trial court found it but the Supreme Court ruled against it. So acquitted siya sa madaling sabi. So pag sinabi ninyong hindi pa nako-convict ang mga Marcoses, well, sinasabi ng Rappler that's not true. In the case of Mrs. Marcos, in 2018, she was convicted of 7 cases of graft and corruption, a violation of Article 3019 Republic Act, RA 3019, okay, which is the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. This is true, but she appealed the case before the Supreme Court. Before a higher court, not sure what court it is, but she appealed before a higher court. Ibig sabihin yan, hindi pa siya convicted by final judgment. The conviction done by the Sandigan Bayan, of course, still stands, pero hindi pa po yun final kasi tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang kaso. Tuloy-tuloy ang kaso dahil ito ay inapila. So please make that distinction. Oo, na-convict siya, pero hindi pa tapos ang kaso. Ngayon, after pinost namin yan sa Luminous, biglang hindi, acquitted na sila, etc. That's not true. Because in 2019, Mrs. Marcos, together with the estate of her husband, nakalagay dun sa kaso, Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos. Yung kaso na yon, acquitted sila. And they were acquitted in 2019. Okay? So that is a different case from the case that is on appeal. Please, wag niyong ipahamak yung Luminous by insisting na na-acquit na si Mrs. Marcos in 2018 because you're talking about a different case altogether. Okay? Sabi ni Ligaya Sekretaryo, anong ang convict? Nakasuhan? Ano ang acquitted? Hindi po. Pag convicted, ibig sabihin may hatol na guilty. Okay? Pero ang naghahatol na guilty unang-una ay ang Regional Trial Court. It's called a trial court kasi dyan po dinidinig, dyan nagpipresenta ng ebidensya, dyan po nagpipresenta at dyan dililitis. Dyan yung, when you say trial kasi, it means you are testing. That's what a trial is. So dyan pinipresenta yung ebidensya at dyan po tinitesting yung ebidensya. So, Mrs. Marcos was already previously convicted in another case, acquitted by the Supreme Court. In 2019, she was also this time she was acquitted in the Sandigan Bayan, which is the trial court. Okay? Itong 2018 na kaso, she was convicted on 7 counts but she immediately appealed the case. Hanggang ngayon, wala pa pong resulta yung kaso na yon. Anong sinasabi ni Ma'am Ligaya? Ano ang convict? Ano nga kasuhan? Ano yung na-acquit? Acquitted means not guilty. Ngayon, kung guilty ka sa trial court at umakyat ka to a higher court, kunwari, sa Court of Appeals ka pumunta. Sa Court of Appeals, pwede kang mag-allege na mali yung facts o mali yung batas. Okay? So, however, pag umakyat ka sa Supreme Court, mali lang ng batas o desisyon ng judge ang maaari niyang iakyat. Wala na yung facts kasi ang facts ay nililitis lang yan sa trial court at minsan pwede i-review pa doon sa at pwedeng iakyat sa Court of Appeals. Pero pagdating sa Korte Suprema, hindi na po pwede ang findings ang pag-try ng facts. Okay? So, Mrs. Marcos's case, let's say the one that we were talking about, the PGH case before, convicted sa trial court, acquitted by the Supreme Court. In 2018, convicted by the Sandigan Bayan, now with a higher court. Waiting. Okay? Ililitis pa yun doon or magpupresenta sila ng mga argumento doon. In 2019, acquitted by the Sandigan Bayan on another case. Huwag niyo pong paghaluin. Okay? Ito yung sinasabi kong mali. Engelbert Marie Cledera says, issues of the Marcoses were all acquitted even at the Supreme Court. No, not all. Mayroon siyang isang pending, 7 counts na kinonvict siya in 2018. Pero hindi pa po final yon dahil umakyat siya sa higher court. Not sure which higher court she took it. Probably the Supreme Court, but we're not sure. Okay? Ulitin ko, huwag niyong sasabihin na acquitted na sila sa lahat ng kaso. Mrs. Marcos still has that pending case of 7 counts of graft. Okay? Huwag niyo po, this is wrong, Mr. Cledera. That is incorrect. Okay? So if you post that, you will be called out for fake news. Okay? So don't even post that on Luminous because we will be forced to call you out or to take you out on timeout. I-disappear muna namin kayo for a certain period because this is incorrect. It doesn't mean that Mrs. Marcos is already guilty kasi nga umakyat siya sa higher court. Okay? Ay, we are a bit confused. Okay. In 2019, she was acquitted of a 200 billion ill-gotten wealth case. Okay? Dinamay dito si Senator Amy at si Senator Bongbong at si Miss Irene Marcos and a certain Constante Rubio. Nitignan ko yung basis ito yung mga bank deposits worth 976 million in Security Bank and Trust Company, 711 million at Traders Royal Bank. Okay? For having these deposits, the PCGG said that the Marcos family and Rubio also had they had these accounts and ang claim is that these were ill-gotten wealth. All right. Yung case naman that is in the Sandigan Bayan for which Mrs. Marcos was convicted involved the creation of bank deposits in a Swiss bank account. Okay? So magkaiba yan. Yung acquittal was for local banks. Yung conviction is for Swiss bank accounts. Okay? So para hindi na kayo ma-confuse. So, acquitted for the local bank accounts, Security Bank and Traders Royal Bank, Swiss bank accounts, convicted, but appealed to a higher court. Okay? Nililinaw lang natin para hindi rin kayo nagkakamali because if you post an acquittal, you will be called out for fake news. Okay? Hi! Shout out daw kay Atlas La Magna. Magandang gabi din po. Ito yung sabi, pakilinaw nga po. Ito, ulitin ko ha, Security Bank Traders Royal Bank Deposits, 900 million yung isa, 700 million yung isa, allegedly ill-gotten wealth, acquitted. Yun buong pamilya yun. Mrs. Marcos, Senator Bongbong, Senator Amy, Miss Irene, all of them were charged, but all of them were also acquitted. Harry, stop. All of them were acquitted. Sandigan Bayan, in 2018, convicted Mrs. Marcos for creating Swiss accounts, bank accounts, and depositing money there. Doon, convicted, waiting for an appeal. Okay? Kasi nako-confuse eh. Sinasabi ng ibang tao na yung 2019 acquittal applied to the 2018 conviction. No, that's not true. Okay? Ito. Sabi ng Yellow Wolves na di lang nakukulong si Mrs. Marcos dahil absuelto ni Piduts dahil nga may katandaan na. No! Okay? There is a Supreme Court decision involving a very old man na who was still in jail. At sabi ng Supreme Court, by reasons of age, hindi na siya dapat magstay pa in jail. So, dahil sa katandaan yan. There is no law that says that if you're over 75, hindi ka na pwedeng makonvict. What is possible is that you'll be convicted, but the judge could shorten your sentence or suspend your sentence. Okay? So, walang batas na ganyan. Huwag niyong i-assume na komot over 75, automatic, hindi na makukulong yon or hindi na makukonvict yon. Because the court still has to make a decision on whether or not there is a crime committed and if that person is guilty of that crime. Okay? Well, don't allow your biases to insist to be imposed on the facts. The fact is, Mrs. Marcos was convicted, but she appealed it. And she filed an appeal, a bail pending appeal. Inaalaw po yun. So, she filed for bail and it was granted by the court. Okay? That is why she is out. Pero ang tingin ko dyan is that ultimately she will also be acquitted of these other cases. John Balyon asks, how many appeals can be done in one case and what are those appeals? There are two kinds of appeal. It's an appeal after final judgment, and there's what we call there's also an appeal on certiorari, which is, it's an appeal, no? But you can also go to the higher court even in the middle of a case when there is finding of grave abuse of discretion by a judge when he makes a decision that doesn't dispose of the case. Halimbawa, during a criminal case, meron akong sinusumiti na ebidensya. Ayaw tanggapin ni judge. I can take that issue to a higher court. That is a certiorari. So you can go to a higher court. That's not exactly an appeal. Now, for example, my client was convicted. I go to a higher court and say that the judge did not appreciate this evidence, so, and so. Okay. Or, certiorari on appeal, the judge committed grave abuse of discretion on the following matters. So, how many times can you appeal? Well, it depends. If you can take the case to the Court of Appeals, and then after that, if you lose in the Court of Appeals, you can take it to the Supreme Court, and then that's it. Okay. In the trial court, you can file for an MR, take it to the CA. In the CA, you lose, you file for an MR. If you lose again, you go to the Supreme Court. You lose, you file for a motion for reconsideration. You lose again, and that's the end of that. Thank you kay Rene Braga Baingko, pang pandesal naman ngayon. Uy, salamat. Sabi ni Ma'am Mona Vag, whatever Hanash, Marcos pa rin, still here watching from Norway. Hindi po Hanash. What I'm saying is that we're just giving you the facts. Ngayon, whether, alam ko naman mahal niyo yung mga Marcoses, regardless of the conviction or acquittal. Pero para hindi kayo ma-fake news, be careful about what you're saying. Diba? Ito, Ma'am Chai says, asks, ang mga judge ba na nag-handle ng mga cases ng Marcos ay appointed ng mga Aquino? Most of them, yes. Pero yung iba, the later ones. Siyempre, sa tagal ng ibang mga kaso, some of the judges were appointed by later presidents. Yeah. Ma'am Ruth says, good evening to our beloved, gorgeous, and quick-witted lawyer. Thank you po. Eto, solid BBM Marcos for president pa rin. Di naman naku-convict si Senator BBM, kayo naman. Acquitted nga siya. Attorney, question, do you still accept and handle cases? Do you still practice law? I'm still a lawyer, if that's what you mean, yeah. May mga kaso pa ba si FLIRM, First Lady Imelda Romualdez Marcos, na umuusad pa rin up to now? I know of that one case that's on appeal. According to some of the newspapers, there's still about 18 cases left. Hindi ko sure kung ano yung status ng mga yon. Ma'am Ligay says, paano namin o ako lang siguro acquitted, ano yon, appeal o appeal, ano yan, convicted and ay sus. Okay, di ko na nagets. Okay. Hi kay Benedict Corpus, Blessed Sunday daw. Ito, Merly Pinano says, watching from Kuwait. Marcos pa rin buong family namin. Hindi ko naman sinasabing hindi, di ba? O na dapat lumipat kayo. All I'm saying is that let's just clear that one thing up. Don't insist. Okay? Kasi may mga fact checkers. Baka ma-take down yung mga account niyo if you post that the Marcoses have been acquitted in all their cases. Well, si Senator Bongbong has no more, as far as I know, has no more pending criminal case against him for yung mga ill-gotten wealth. Na-acquit na po nga sila in 2019 on this last case before the Sandigan Bayan. Ma'am Jocelyn Aguinaga says, sobrang daming pera naman yan. Sana kung maibalik sa kanila, pamigay na lang sa lahat ng Pilipino. Di yan madala sa langit. Well, let's see, because we have to determine if they also validly earned that. So, iba pa po yung issue na yon. Doc Firefox Reggie says, can we avail of your services, real estate? You'll have to talk to Attorney Ahmed for that one. Okay? Kasi ako yung busy eh. Siya yung active litigating partner. Ayesha Kansas, pwede na po bang makasuhan ang faking Lobredo sa pagka-vice president na hindi naman talaga siya nanalo? Yung electoral protest po ni Senator Bongbong, he lost in the Presidential Electoral Tribunal, so he took it to the Supreme Court. So it is on appeal. So, Ma'am Ruth says, I'm a widow for 10 years. I lose in the regional trial court regarding a judicial settlement. Inakyat ko po sa DOJ, kailan at paano ko malalaman ang result? DOJ, hindi po. If you lose in the RTC, you take it to a higher court. The DOJ is not a court. Check with your lawyer po. BPM for President po kami at naghihikayat mag-join Luminous. Trixie, ma'am naman. Thank you. Kesensya Shimoda says that how to contact, grabe si Doc. I think you'll have to send a PM to Attorney Ahmed. Ma'am Chai is asking, is there a Cruz-Angeles Paglinawan law firm? There is one, yes. But, we can't discuss any current cases, pero we're very, very careful about what cases, or he's very, very careful about what cases to accept. Si Deliman, nakailang appeal na po ba? Kailan kaya matutuluyan masintensyahan? Appeal, hindi pa po siya nag-a-appeal. Nagpa-file siya ng mga cases, what we call petitions for certiorari. Ibig sabihin ng certiorari ng cases na yan, in the middle of the trial, aakyat siya either sa Korte Suprema o sa Court of Appeals, pwede rin, maakyat siya para questionin yung decision ng judge that is not about guilt or innocence. So, kunwari, nag-file siya, let's say, ng demurrer to evidence. Example lang to ha, demurrer to evidence. Meaning, hindi enough yung ebidensya na prinisinta ng prosecution, dapat i-dismiss na yung kaso kahit, hindi, that's a bad example. Sorry. Meron siyang pinipresenta na, kini-question halimbawa na witness na inadmit ng court, tapos sabi niya hindi dapat ina-admit because this, or this, she can go to a higher court. Now, Senator De Lima has gone to the Supreme Court several times at nagpa-inhibit siya ng judges several times also. So, in fact, hindi matuluyan masintensyahan kasi kailangan pa nilang magpresenta ng ebidensya. Dahil nagpresenta ng ebidensya ang prosecution in most of these cases. Okay? Tatlo yan eh. May isang kaso na na-dismiss, pero yung dalawa ongoing pa. Hindi pa siya masisintensyahan kasi wala pang pronouncement of guilt or innocence. Hi kay Orlando Castro. I'm just wondering, let's say BBM wins as president in 2022, would there be a benefit for him if hahabulin ni BBM si VP Lenny for the Dayan? No, there's none. Because usually, you file an electoral protest, one, to determine who really won, and two, in order to sit. Diba? The law is really bad in that case, and the legislature has not addressed this. Unless he files for damages, which I doubt that Senator Bongbong wants to do. If he wins as president, I understand that he's going to be a magnanimous one. Hindi siya yung type kasi na na nanggaganti. So, 'di ba? What did you hear anything from the Marcoses when they got back about the Aquinos? They don't even speak badly of Mrs. Aquino. 'Di ba? Pwede po ba kasuhan ang PCGG chairman sa pagkamanalo ng mga Marcos sa kaso? Only if it was filed with malice. Meaning, alam nilang walang kaso, wala talagang ebidensya. So, there is such a thing as malicious prosecution. Pero it's very rare. Hindi pwedeng magkaso, let's say, kailangan mag-complain yung mga Marcoses. And like I keep telling you, the Marcoses aren't like that. Well, at least they haven't done that in the 30 years since Mrs. Aquino took over, di ba? In 86 and up to now, they're not the type to file cases for their prosecution. Once na-acquit sila, okay na sila. Okay, this one is for me, I will say I disagree. Scrap the 87 Constitution. If there is something you don't like in the 87 Constitution, scrapping it doesn't mean that certain things are going to go away. Halimbawa, martial law remains as a protective means, as a means for the state to protect itself. Okay? Second, the Bill of Rights. Our rights don't disappear just because the 87 Constitution will be scrapped. Diba? Now, the reason why we don't usually say scrap the 87 Constitution is because you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Ibig sabihin nun, so ilan lang ang ayaw mo, gusto mo ibasura lahat. That's not it's not the right way to go about things. Merong tinatawag na law of conservation or rule of conservation. It's not exactly a law. Where you take action that is the most efficient and minimalizes the amount of intervention and the amount of gulo that you can cause to society. So, yung mga ganyan, scrap the 87 Constitution is really all sound and fury signifying nothing. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't tell people what you don't like about it. You don't affect change by saying something like that. Pinpoint what is wrong, and then we can work on taking that apart. Diba? Mark De Jesus says, ask dun sa 2018 graft case na na-convict si Mrs. Marcos, may kasama pa bang ibang members ng Marcos family? Hindi. Hindi kasama si BBM. Sabi for sure gagamitin ng kalaban. Hindi po. Well, at least not against BBM. Is having no client or complainant considered a malicious accusation? No, but that is a disbarable offense. It violates the code of ethics of lawyers. And so we can see that the Supreme Court was being very lenient with Attorney Cheljok, when he went to court and he was not sure about having a client at all. If any other lawyer had done that, they could have been disbarred. Thank you kay Nathaniel Quintos for his super sticker. Sir Mauro, 2019, the Sandigan Bayan's 4th Division threw out 200 billion pesos for future case against the Marcos and their 3 children for insufficient evidence. That's what I said. Diba? That is not the 2018 conviction. Mrs. Marcos lang po yun. Uh, Attorney Trixie deserves a seat in the Senate. But I'm not running. May possible po bang maibalik ang yaman ng mga Marcoses na kinuha ng PCGG na hindi napatunayan ng hukuman? Kaya yung mga hindi napatunayan, sinoli po yun. But most of them were against the dummies, alleged dummies of the Marcoses. Thank you nga pala kay Sir Mauro. Let me see, ano po ba? Eto, Ezron Adaw says, yung twin mansion ng Marcos sa Laguna, ang ganda at maayos nung nasikwester nung maibalik sa mga Marcoses, pangit at kinahoy na, may caretaker na lang at tambayan ng mga siklista. Oh, that's terrible. I'm sorry to hear about that. Angel Ramos says, watching from Dubai, ask ko lang po yung mga cases ni Mrs. Bautista against Andy Bautista. Wala pa pong, at dito alam niyo na may nangyayari. Nag-file si Tisha Cruz Bautista in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, or 2018, against Andy Bautista and submitted evidence to the NBI. Ang problema po ay inupuan ng NBI. So that's where they stand. But she did file cases for annulment and others against her own husband. So we will be waiting for the results of the, well, yung NBI nangako pa nga in 2020 during their budget hearing na, no, 2019 during their budget hearing na arestuhin nila si Andy Bautista, but of course they have not done so. So actually, we really have to take the NBI to task. They lied to the Senate and they are lying to Mrs. Bautista. Anong civil cases na ba nag-prove din ng corruption, kasi may mga ganong cases ang Marcoses na talo sila? Well, there's the case that was filed in Hawaii by the human rights victims, and there are those cases for the return of ill-gotten wealth in the Swiss bank deposits, where the cases were actually filed, if I'm not mistaken, locally and in Switzerland. Basta napatunayan sa Switzerland that these are ill-gotten wealth cases. And so, in those cases na nakakollect tayo, and those deposits had been used for agrarian reform. So there are at least two po. Let me double check. Tinignan ko kanina eh. Ayan. Oops. Double check ko lang saglit ha. Ayan. But dun sa criminal cases po, yun pa lang, yung last conviction pa lang in 2018, yun na nga lang po yata ang remaining na conviction na hindi pa po nare-resolve in an appeals case. Let me see. Puro criminal kasi yung sa Sandigan Bayan eh. So right now, in the Sandigan Bayan, there are yung cases, dalawa pa lang cases on 7 counts na lang. Yun na lang po ang pending na cases. But the civil cases, the ones for the human rights victims in Hawaii, and then there's one for the ill-gotten wealth cases. Ito, Nitbuga says, alam naman natin na mainit tayo sa mata ni Mami Ellen nang tatarget din ng fake news. Thanks for the enlightenment. Is there any truth about the urban legend regarding Maharlika country? No, that's not true. The Italianos, also not true. Salamat po. Okay. Well, let's not say na lang not true, but there's no evidence for that. Yung saying that Maharlika was a place is also incorrect, because Maharlika was a class of people. And it isn't even the royal class, it is the aristocracy. Pero sila po yung ginagamit na parang mga in the absence of an army, ginagamit sila ng mga royalty to help in the wars of occupation and so on by the local the Datus and the Rajas. So, Maharlika, as a country, there is no evidence to show that. As for the claims allegedly of the Italianos, also no evidence of that. And all the cases that have gone to court have been dismissed against them, ha. Ang PCGG ay ginawa dahil sa pamumulitika, sabi ni Eric Kedeng. 30 years pero halos walang ginawa. Hindi naman po walang ginawa. More than 30 years. Mga ibang bansa umutang kay PFEM, mga gold, ng gold, gawing gold reserve. Kaya kasabwat din sila sa mga oligarko sa ating bansa dahil ayaw nilang magbayad. Not sure about those gold, ha? Yung mga pinautang. Pero yung PCGG, they have done some things. Yun nga, yung Swiss bank deposits that have already been used for the agrarian reform project, for agrarian reform. Kasi yun nga po yung purpose. The PCGG, if they, according to their law, was pagka may ill-gotten wealth cases at makuha, then ginagamit yung pondo na yun para sa agrarian reform. Hindi yun revert to treasury. Okay. Sabi ni Ma'am Crescencia Shimoda, magpapa-ice cream daw siya. Paano po ba? Punta po kayo sa YouTube at in the dialogue box, there's a dollar sign. You just have to press that and they'll give you instructions para sa super chat at super sticker. Kung hindi man, may PayPal account nandun sa YouTube namin na you just click it, it's on the banner. But I think you have to use a laptop. Viterbo Guevara says, nag-file po ng electoral protest si BBM. Pag di po ba na-resolve ng electoral tribunal ang protest, nire-refund po bang payment for filing the protest? Okay, ganito. Nag-appeal pa po kasi si Senator BBM sa Supreme Court. So, hindi pa po tapos yung electoral protest niya. It's on appeal. That's what I'm saying. Parate ha, kapag inapil ang kaso, hindi pa yan tapos. Yes, nire-refund usually ang pera unless merong mga ginamit. Halimbawa, kung nag-deposit siya for purposes of recount at wala naman recount, isusoli yun ng buo. Kung may mga nabukas at may mga selected recounts, as I understand this case, or merong mga inimbestigahan ng mga ballot boxes, kakaltasan para masagot yung gastos para doon. Asks, pwede po bang baguhin sa mga textbook na nagpapakita na masama ang mga Marcoses? Of course, pwede. But it's really the authors, ano? And of course, we have to check with the DepEd kung paano nila, guys, nire-review, sorry, Yoshi, stop. Paano nila nire-review yung mga textbooks? Sabi ni si Coach Jarrett ba to? Maapektuhan ba ng acquittal ng 2019 and 2021 to 200 billion cases yung 2018 conviction ni First Lady? No, those are separate cases. One does not affect the other. Besides, doon pag acquitted na, wala na yung kaso, disappear na siya. Diba? At hindi rin kasi pwede dahil it's a criminal case, may jeopardy na, so hindi na pwedeng i-apila ng kabila. So, ang 2018 conviction na lang yung iniintay natin kay Mrs. Marcos. And if I'm not mistaken, that should be the last case. So, they don't affect each other, ha? They have nothing to do with each other. Nax, andito si Coach Jarrett. Naloka naman ako. Bob Mario says, I watched the documentary of GMA7. The host is Miss Mel Tiangco, and the First Lady gave her a sneak peek of the documents and the amount of the allegedly ill-gotten wealth. Do they use all of that documents? Do they use all of those? It depends. Ano po yung documents na yun? Were they court records? Or were their own documents? Siyempre, we can't just say, oy, may dokumento si Madam. We have to know what kind of document she had been showing. Now, if those documents were land titles, that thing speaks for itself, di ba? watched the interview of PGMA with SAS, and it's really sad that she didn't get proper recognition for her part in fixing the country's economy using EVAT. Panay Hello, Garci, and Pinoy Admin. Ganito po kasi, well, we will ultimately all be judged by history, and it's too close. Kaya nga sinasabi natin, hindi dapat na deklara na hero si Benigno Aquino Jr. Kasi it had only been 3 years after he had died. Masyado pang emotional yung mga tao, pero nagmamadali na ideklara or at least gawan na ng mga ano ba tawag doon, monumento. 'Di ba? That's why also yung mga historians natin, they don't write definitive histories until the rule of thumb is about 50 years after the death of the person. So I think that GMA will get whatever recognition she deserves. Teka. Ay, hindi kita na. Ayan. Hi daw. Po, ano? What's that? Ayan. Paula La Guapa says, di ka yata stressed sa mga issue. Salamat. Nakatulog ako. At saka nakakain. Yan, sabi ni Sir Mauro, hindi po ba yung 18 real properties at Daly City, San Francisco, Lake Tahoe, and Los Angeles County are all absolved? As far as I know, yes. Ang mga nakuha, and those are civil cases, Lindenmere, yung towers in New York, and one property in in either LA or San Francisco, there's one property na nakuha po ng PCGG. Okay, let me see. Good evening daw. Ay, what? Nandun na siya sa... Hala, attorney, dinidistract ka na ng subject of my profession. I love it when he or she obeys your command. Subject of your... Oh, are you a vet? The dogs are here kasi everywhere I go, I'm the beast master in this house. Roland Rosales says, sa interview ni Mel Chanco, itanong ko lang ma'am, totoo po kaya yung $890 billion na hawak ni First Lady, isang papel pa lang yun, 178 countries yung deposit nila sa ibang bansa. Right now, I have no evidence either way, no? If Mrs. Marcos says that and then there is nobody who can contradict her, I think that will stand for now. Diba? I will assume that it is true because the presumption is that she's telling the truth. Diba? And unless somebody or there is evidence to prove otherwise. Sorry about that. Yung internet talaga. Yung na-sequester po na government na property ng Marcoses, hindi na po makukuha uli ng Marcoses. Tama po ba? Nasasayangan lang po ako dun sa Palace in the Sky sa Tagaytay, pinabayaan na po ng Tourism LGU. Yes. Yung mga, those that have been adjudicated in favor of the government, hindi na po mababalik. Sabi ni Ma'am Ruby, si Duterte daw ay poon pero Aquino yung nagmamadali sa mga monumento, pati pera. Attorney, di na ba mababago yan? Well, ganito po yun, di ba? Sa US, they're taking down monuments of men who kept slaves and that they, for a while, they considered heroes. And then there are men who had, how do you call this? Issues with women and so on. So they're taking down those monuments. Kasi tayo, usually we allow monuments because we agree na dapat isinasabay, ginagawang monumento at binibigyan natin ng pugay itong mga taong to. We can also change our minds about that, diba? Sabi ni Albert Mish, sana maging guest din ninyo sa Karambola si Manny P. Sure, why not? But we don't know if he would want to. Ask lang po, sabi ni Melvin Esguera, Very funny. I don't answer personal questions. Pwede po ba ilagay sa content ni Coach Jared? Uy, grabe kayo. Huwag naman kayo mag-impose kay Coach Jared, no? Kakahiya. Dapat lang na baguhin ang mga textbooks sa Pinas declaring the Marcoses as evil. Actually, we shouldn't declare anybody evil. That's wrong on so many counts. Textbooks, particularly history books, should just give us, oh, this is what happened and so and so. Diba? And then we can talk about how it affects us right now. Pero yung calling somebody evil, that's really wrong on so many counts. Even if a person has committed a crime, you still don't call them evil, di ba? Kasi kawawa rin mga estudyante sa ginagawang panloloko ng mga Aquinos. I'm a victim. I was thought wrong too. Well, all of us did, no? At least some people, ganito yan eh. What changed my mind? I didn't change my mind that something went wrong during the Marcos years. Okay, because I lived in some of those years. But I don't believe that they're like the devil incarnate either. Hello. But nobody is like that. I would like to think that every person in history was simply a human being. And some of them made bad decisions, some of them made good ones, some of them made more bad decisions than good ones, and then we judge them on that. Not on whether or not they were good or evil. Grabe kasi itong mga to kung baka evil talaga naman. Thank you kay Ma'am Crescencia Paliso. Sana pag napag-isipan na ni BBM para sa pagka-presidente sa darating na halalan ngayon 2022, sana suportahan natin siya, mga kababayan. BBM lang sa Okay. Dapat ang history told as it is. Bahala na ang mga batang mag-judge sino ba bida sa istorya. Lalo na ngayon, may mga dating villain pero biglang madaming nakaka-relate. For example, Joker. That's actually a good point of view, Ma'am Ruby, kasi we have to look at people as human beings. Dati kasi kahit yung mga heroes natin, di ba, sinasabi natin, wow, super gwapo ni Rizal, super talas, super talino, super ganyan. But actually, they're human beings and they made mistakes, di ba? For us, Rizal is still a hero for what he had written, even if during his trial, he tried to compromise. Diba? During his trial, dinenounce niya yung Katipunan and he asked to serve under the Spanish crown as a doctor in Cuba. Diba? Ambeto Campo writes about whether or not Rizal was actually a good doctor. Some doctors say he probably wasn't. So we have to see both heroes and opponents as human beings. Even now, yung mga tinatawag natin na dilawan, we can say that they're wrong. But we can't say that, alam mo yan, they're probably wrong because that's how they thought all their lives. We also have to consider it's not because anybody here is evil, but that we are all human beings and that we look at things differently from each other. Diba? And we all have weaknesses. Good evening. Question po, pwede po bang kasuhan ang China for their negligence sa COVID-19? I really would not want to go into that because first of all, although a disease spread quickly and to have begun in one country, we don't necessarily condemn them. Did anybody condemn, let's say, France for the Spanish flu? I'm not sure if it was France. Diba? What about the avian flu? Did you condemn and are we getting any, is anybody being sued in the United States for was it the avian flu or the swine flu? Diba? I think that is a bad precedent all around. Seriously. It makes for finger pointing and racism. We prosecute people, not countries. We don't prosecute entire races. We go after the person who committed the crime, not the people associated with him. Okay? Be very careful about how you're thinking because that is guilt by association. Pa-shout out sa aming OFWs always. Watching you right now on our lunch break here at the Ministry of Human Resources and Emiratization Office, Abu Dhabi. Hi! Para sa inyong lahat. Ilan ba kayo dyan? Parang ang dami, no? That problem with other people, they tend to use history as gospel truth and would not accept new discovery or new evidence. That is correct. History evolves also depending on the evidence and the time period that we are in. Also, halimbawa, sa US, they had to go through some soul searching. Kasi yung mga iniidolo nila, the framers of the Declaration of Independence were slave owners. And for a person to be considered a voter, you had to be male and you had to own property. And what are property? Slaves were considered property, not just real estate, not just land, slaves. And so now they have to do some soul searching. Do you apply now the modern day values to their idols in the past? For me, that would be wrong. It has to be, how do you call this, relativism. In the 1700s, that was how people thought. It's wrong now by any standard. But can we judge somebody based on what their our values now for a person who had been living 200 years ago? Diba? That's correct, John Rai. Bravo. Attorney, mga pare lang naman ang nagsasabi na evil ang mga Marcoses, probably dahil kay Cardinal Sin. Well, because history, there is new evidence to indicate otherwise, like the lack of convictions, 'di ba? Or at least the high rate of, let's not say lack of convictions, the high rate of acquittals. What, 98% acquittal rate of the Marcoses indicates that there is something wrong also with how we were looking at these. We were so sure, that's when I say we, the Filipino people, let's say for example na lang, in 1986, people were so sure about these ill-gotten wealth and all that. But now with the acquittals, we have to rethink, di ba? Vicente Fernandez says, we have social media to be thankful for. The truth about many things of our country's history is being revealed. And listeners can weigh things on the matter, especially when Enrile talks. Which is why what I'm saying is that just because somebody comes up with something new also doesn't mean that it's the truth. Diba? Senator Enrile presents a very unique point of view because he was present and he was involved in many decisions. But again, this is also his point of view. So the more points of view we get, the better. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that any particular person is right on all counts. Even, diba? Even the most discredited witnesses, for example, like a clock, can still be right sometimes. So in the end, it's about what we can prove. Senator Endile, I like a lot of what he says, but I'm not going to believe it all completely either, diba? There are some things where he must protect himself, and so while he will give us facts, he will also give us the facts that, well, he will still be in his defense. Diba? Although I must admit, Senator Enrile does strive very hard to be objective. Okay, second topic na. Kung kaya na ba, last question. Dapat ang history sa elementary at high school, sabi ni Thick Walls, nasa cultural ang subject para maging nationalistic ang approach. Ang mga tungkol sa politics, dapat sa college ituro dahil andito nagiging open-minded at curious yung mga kabataan. I think ganito yan. It's not really, they don't teach politics, they teach government, which is part of our history. Kasi dati nga, ang definition lang natin ng study of history is the study of the development of the country, and usually it involved governments. Now, we know that history is made up of so many things. It includes, how do you call this? Our responses to climate, which means architecture, which means the evidence of the designs that we have adopted and so on. It also indicates the kind of foreign influences we had. So all of that is part of our history. It just takes some of our educators a while to recognize that history is far more layered than that. tama yung mga fact checkers kung sila lang kuno, sila lang lagi tama, pati si Manong Johnny sinabihan na false. I swear, you're right about that. Oh my gosh. Okay. Um, we said we're going to tell, somebody kasi asked about DJ Loonie. I think that's what he's called, the rapper. Okay. He had been supposedly caught with four others in a buy bust operation. He was arrested and probable cause had been found against him. 10 sachets of shabu were allegedly presented as evidence. A year later, after 6 months, he was allowed bail, and that's important. He was allowed bail because although selling of shabu is non-bailable, apparently there wasn't, the evidence of guilt was not strong. So after 6 months, he was allowed bail. After that, another 6 months, and on what we, the court eventually acquitted him and everybody with him for the crime of selling the shabu, supposedly the 10 sachets of shabu. There were two reasons why the court found in his favor. It was because, shoot, ayan. It was because, first, the witness, supposedly the police officer, let me double check, no? Ayun. There was no independent witness because it was a police officer who was the witness who was posing as the buyer. It was a buy-bust operation. In buy-bust operations, according to the drugs law, teka lang. According to the drugs law, uh, me, kailangan during a buy-bust operation, there has to be an independent witness which is non-PNP. So usually ang ginagamit dyan, barangay, member ng barangay council, the barangay chairman, and so on. So there was no independent witness. So medyo violation na yun. Plus, the witness himself was not able to prove that he had actually talked to Mr. Loonie in prior to the bust operation. Supposedly, nag-usap daw sila in some club. Tapos he even said he took a selfie. And then later on, the buy bust happened. Apparently, this police officer who was also posing as a buyer was unable to produce the photographic evidence that he had met with Mr. Loonie or DJ Loonie prior to the buy bust. Also, in the absence of that, in the absence also of an independent witness, the court threw out the case. They said that, yun, kasi yung buy bust was in the parking lot eh. So, the evidence of guilt was not sufficient. There is very little credible evidence to prove his guilt. Now, after that, sabi nung mga naaresto that they were going to sue the police for a wrongful arrest. But I have not heard of any case that has been publicized against the police officers who allegedly arrested him. So, yun po yun. Yun yung kasi may katanungan dun eh. Okay, guys, huwag kayong mag-aaway dun sa ha. Although it works in my favor kasi maraming comments, huwag naman po sana kayong mag-aaway. Nestor Rivera says parking lot. Yes, actually, it happens a lot. Don't laugh. It does happen a lot. The buy-bust operations happen in parking lots, especially in malls kasi mahirap pasukin. Pero in this case, because it was a bypass, they were nakaabang sila. So usually kasi yung mga nagbebenta, they feel a little secure in mall parking lots because it's not that easy to get into. But in this case, naabangan sila. Allegedly, well, the court said it didn't happen. So, posible ba na binaba ang kaso sa Section 11? No, acquitted siya eh. Bakit bababa yung kaso at all? Does the president cannot order a search. Okay, it's the courts that do that. The courts also issue a warrant of arrest. Now, the president can order operations against the NPA who killed Corporal Villasis. Okay, so I have not heard that the president ordered that. I think that the AFP doesn't even need to wait for the president. Galit na sila because Corporal Villasis was killed in a treacherous way. His hands were tied behind his back and he was shot behind the head. I mean in the back, which is, treachery. Sana mahalungkat sa heritage yung ingay sa build kasi napag-usapan ni Boss Conrad yung LRT as an eyesore. Same goes sa Parex. Parex. Parex ingay. I don't know what Parex is. Pero ma'am, doon sa extension ng Harbor Link to Cavitex. Ma yung heritage sana. Medyo maano yan eh. Okay, LRT. No, it was bad design kasi nga nakatumbok doon sa monumento eh. Sila DJ Loonie Kabayan, yung rapper. Okay. Hello po, bakit po ang bunga ng isang mansanas sa isang government property is owned by the nation but the illegal drugs found in government property was not? You're talking about something that's connected to real property and therefore is considered an immovable and therefore is considered part of government property. But illegal drugs are movable and so not necessarily part of government property. Yun lang po yun. There's a difference. You have to distinguish between Pero yung isang mansanas, wait, unang-una walang mansanas dito sa Pilipinas. If you're talking about mansanas na nasa puno at yung puno nasa government property, then it's considered fruits of the person who owns the property. Okay? Immovable din yung puno. And so yung fruits niya will be considered owned by the government because they own the land. Illegal drugs found in government property, they are movable and they couldn't have just sprung there and they don't grow there. They wouldn't even naturally grow there and so are not considered that. Also, there are two rules that you're talking about. One is the rule in civil law about the fruits that are found in fruits or accessories to an immovable property. But illegal drugs first are movable property and subject of criminal proceedings. So it's a criminal na yung standards na ilalagay natin doon. In fact, if any person who is within an area of control where those illegal drugs can be found, could be considered as the person in possession of those illegal drugs. Okay, government agencies cannot be convicted of possession, but people can. Only people can. Okay? Saan po ba ako pabor? Ako. Ako o kayo? For President ISD, for V. Bakit ba kayo ang hilig magtanong at saka nagpipilit kayo? I like them both. And since there are no plans on either side, I don't have to make a decision yet. Yeah? And right now, I find it impossible to make such a decision. Bakit? Nag-declare ba si Inday? Wala pa siyang sinasabi, di ba? O, si BBM, may sinabi na ba kung anong posisyon itatakbo niya? Wala din, di ba? Bakit ako mauuna pa sa kanila? Kapal naman ng mukha ko. Ma'am Rida says, sa mga nagtatanong sa vloggers kung kanino silang presidentiables, marami dyan di sasagot. Bahala na kayong tumimbang base sa mga comments nila at pwede din pagbasihan yung kung sino iboboto ninyo. Anong connection ng iboboto ninyo kung dun sa comments namin? Ang planner ng Parex is Palafox and regarding doon, di naman magdidilim yan dahil maliwanag dyan. Okay, I have no idea what you're talking about. Kailangan aralin ko pa yan. Wala pa nga nagpa-file ng candidacy, huwag niyong pangunahan. Two times na ako sa live nakahabol pa, sabi ni Ma'am Rosalie. Ano ba ang issues ninyo about build, build, build and heritage? Wala ngang heritage issue si Sec Mark eh. Vicente Fernandez says the myth about the Philippine gold is, I guess, a fact basing on the US President Bush saying that the Philippines is the richest nation in the world, corroborated by docs. Gosh, guys, you have to present evidence in better ways than that. When President Bush says something, it's hearsay. We have no, diba, our knowledge is based on him saying, and actually it's double hearsay. What did he base his statement on? We really need to go we really going to need to plan a live that talks about what we should consider as evidence, di ba? Sabi ng Team Pisot, allegedly ipapatigil nila ang Oplan Tokhang pag sila ang nanalo. Kung magkatotoo, dadami na naman ang drug users at pushers. Magiging unsafe na naman ang mga iskinita natin, lalo na sa gabi. Well, yeah, I agree. Totally agree. Sabi ni Chev, for me, wala pa ako napipili kung sino iboboto ko. Pero isa lang ang garantisado, 0 votes to the incompetent electionists and return of the comebacks. I know I'm not voting for certain very noisy presidential aspirants who might not be able intellectually to handle the reins of power. BJ Can says, tagal na yung issue ng yung gold ng Marcos, wala namang nahanap kaya chismis lang. Hidden wealth nga, di ba? Night duty po ako, extra akong gumising only for your live. Uy, ma'am, maraming salamat po, but please get enough sleep. Sir Nestor says, di ka napapagod to promote the real change, well ba yan o real? Real changes na happening sa bansa. Ganito po kasi yun eh. When I see that there's some people who suffer from wrong information, it's parang nangangati ka na to correct it, di ba? Parang ganon. Even better, even more. Kasi dinidismiss tayo eh ng mga elitista mag-isip. Tawagin na natin silang mga taga-kabilang bakod. They dismiss people like us because we like this administration. And para sa akin kasi objective eh, simple lang yan. Ang tagal ditong mga elitista na to, and I have seen them work. They have not done anything for education to make people more educated so that they can participate in the national discussions. By doing that, we can tell that they just want to perpetuate themselves in power. Kasi ayaw nilang mas laganap ang edukasyon eh. Ayaw nilang makaangat ang pag-iisip ng mga tao. They're happy keeping people ignorant. Yun ang reason kung bakit gusto ko tong administrasyon na ito. And it would not be fair to not help, di ba? So kailangan yung tutulong din tayo na ipalaganap yung ibang impormasyon na otherwise hindi talaga aabot sa mga tao. Ang mga media companies natin, they're owned by elite interests. And so kailangan natin to exploit as much as possible itong alternatibo na nasa social media tayo. Capable tayo na i-correct yung ibang mga fallacies that these elites allow the majority to think. Yung mga ganun, bakit hindi sila tumutulong halimbawa dun sa pag-aaral, masusing pag-aaral ng ating kasaysayan. Baka kasi matuto tayo ma-realize natin unang-una how temporary power is. Pangalawa, how all of these people are not really heroes but human beings who made the right choices so that we are compelled to make the right choices also, di ba? Okay, ganito Ruben, the boy and girl, aka Gamer Dudes. Please invite Duque in Karambola. Ganito po and I will speak na rin for my co-hosts. Ang mga co-hosts ko, So, halimbawa, we do like inviting people, pero the moment, ganun kami kasutil, the moment na nagpipilit kahit sino, whether ordinary tao or government official, pagka pinipilit na kami, that's when we say no. Ayaw namin. Because it seems to serve somebody else's interests eh. So hindi kami ganon. So the best thing that you can do is kasi kami we're free if he wants to be interviewed. 'Di ba? Second, komentarista kami. Binabase namin, nag-a-analyze kami. So ibig sabihin may ibang nagre-report, general rule, may ibang nagre-report niyan. At binabaklas namin yung mga reportage na 'yon natin yung mga pakay behind it at saka ma-analyze yung mga movements ng tao. Sometimes we don't even need to interview dahil mas objective yung nai-report. May dokumento. So yun yung rule kahit sa mga reporters. Kung ang nire-report nila ay dokumento, they don't even have to get the other side. Sabi ni Eric, sabi ng Team Pisot, yun na pala yan. Sabi ni Ma'am Rosemary, may pumapasok na mga ads. You're probably either, well, may ads talaga po sa YouTube at saka sa Facebook. Kasi monetized po ito. Ito, Vicente Fernandez says, Aquinos, wag apostrophe, are convicted and made a hero. FEM faced cases and acquitted, and these yellows are discrediting this president who has done so much for the country. Which also makes us reevaluate, di ba? Which makes us believe in things like redemption. Well, and kumbaga, convictions and acquittals and all of that means that this person made bad choices. But to make judgments on their other capabilities, I think that would be wrong. Mario Borges says, I agree with what you just said. Take for example, bakit biglang dinab ng Pilipino yung mga English programs like Sesame Street and American series? That's correct. We were actually enjoying the benefit of being one of the better English-speaking countries. Filipinos learn languages very easily, and that speaks about intelligence. I don't know why whether it was intentional to dumb us down or they're just going for the least common denominator, diba? Manchus Zef says, for 6 a.m. po dito in Canada and happy to wake up to watch you live. Sino po ba ang pwedeng mag-imbestiga sa corruption sa COA? Many thanks. The Ombudsman. I had the third. What was the third? Nakalimutan ko na tuloy. Yung third natin na topic. It's Duque. But we talked about him yesterday. What I just want to reiterate to everybody is that Duque has a tough job in justifying yung mga kulang sa memoranda, yung mga they sent money to other government agencies, wala silang mga memoranda of agreement to set the terms. Wrong on so many counts. And possibly, if they cannot explain that, and there are no terms of reference, or in terms of reference na yun, violate the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, then they can all possibly go to jail. Yung mga paso na gamot, they're only being asked to explain. If they do not explain satisfactorily, then cases can be filed against them. So again, either way, hindi pa tapos. Meaning, yung kabila, kung umangaw-ngaw sila about corruption, teka muna, kasi part of the due process is to allow them to answer and to comply. Now, if they don't comply before the end of the fiscal year, well, kailan ba? Kasi these requirements were for 2020. We're not sure what timetable the COA gave to them to comply. Usually, they have to comply within 6 months. Kung hindi sila nag-comply within 6 months, then wala na. Tapos na. Di ba? I saw an interview of Mrs. Marcos with Winnie Monsod way back. Clip also includes interview with a World Bank officer confirming about the gold. I'm not sure if that officer is reliable because she was fired according to an article. Again, not well, for me, insufficient. What was the basis for the World Bank officer to confirm about the alleged gold? Eh, Dita Sima Franca says, I stopped casting my vote since the time of Ramos because I was so disgusted by the system. I thought this will go on forever until PRRD came. I feel na meron na uli gobyerno who looks after the welfare of the people. This time I will register to make myself count. Bravo, madam. Ilang beses pa lang po ako nakapanood ng karambola. Napanood ko po yung interview niyo kay BBM. Kung hindi pa po ninyo na-interview si Doc Willie Ong, sana maimbetahan niyo po. Na-interview na po namin si Doc Willie sa Tambayan. Kay Mel Chanco yun, si Winnie interview lang. Sir John Roy says history are written by winners, but it will be tried by facts or new evidence eventually. We used to say that history was written by the winners, but it doesn't hold true anymore because of the various alternatives. History used to be written by the winners because the winners would take over the reins of power, and in the medieval times, the only persons who could actually write were those in the employ of the crown. So, talagang literally, history was written by the winners. Okay? But now, it's a cliche and not necessarily true anymore. James Bardo says, for 30 years, walang bagong public hospital na napapatayo. Bagkus yung mga public ay ginagawang private tapos nagkaroon ng pandemic. Current admin ang sinisisi ng mga dilaw. Di nag-iisip. AD, who is AD? Is this a smokescreen for the opposition? Action Democratico. They're now avoiding anything related to yellow tards and reds. But alas, thanks to SOCMED, bistado na sila. Marcos Gold may be a key for us to success, but don't expect good governance is the true gold of the country. Well said. In which we don't have one. I disagree. I think we're going to get there eventually. We have better governance now. But it takes a lot to change people. Might take some time, but at least we're getting there. Edgardo Sikat says, aware po ba kayo na kumakalat na rumor about former President Marcos inherited results pulled from the Vatican Bank? Sorry, that's really... Those are three unrelated people. Okay? You inherit usually by bloodline, by familial line, or by marriage, usually by relations. So when you say inherit, that already puts us on guard. Jose Rizal's gold. Okay? Gold. Where would Jose Rizal have found the gold? So there's so much to unpack here. Vatican Bank. Why would Jose Rizal have gold in the Vatican Bank if he was a Mason? Tanong lang po, sabi ni Stephen, hindi na po ba mababawi ng gobyerno ang pagmamay-ari sa tubig at kuryente na pwede naman po. Na mapakinabangan naman po ng hustong taong bayan. Pwede po. So, if you're asking why, sige, let's just say this. When we say that we are getting better at governance, it doesn't mean that this government is perfect. Nor can we trust everybody in it. We trust the president and we trust some of his people, but we cannot trust all of them. Some of them may be, sometimes, don't you get the feeling that the president is alone in some of his fights? And for me, especially, water and electricity issues are where it seems like the president is very much alone. take that however way you want to take it. Na, malalaman lang natin ang katotohanan tungkol sa Marcos Gold kung mananalo si BBM. You know what? I actually asked him about that, and even yung mga, there's so many myths around President Marcos that even his family laughs when we ask about it. So, uh, ako, ganun lang yun. I asked Senator Bongbong, and even Senator Amy just rolled her eyes at me. Oh, what are you going to make of that? Even Senator Marcos said, "Oh, I heard about that." Laugh. O, di ba? If it exists, I'm sure they need the money. They could use the money. Why aren't they getting it? May kaugnayan na, bakit parang wala akong nakikitang mga tanong from FB? May kaugnayan na ang ABS-CBN sa CPP, NPA, NDF, kaya pinalipat si Atom Araulio sa GMA. Kaya ngayon, na-impluensyahan na nila ang GMA, nagiging makakaliwa na rin ang palabas. Ito, Rico Bunagan says, okay, let's deal with this information about COVID. Unless the person or a government agency makes the announcement, we shouldn't be doing that because medical information is considered confidential. I'm sure that if the mayor is ill, he will make he or his representatives will make an announcement. Last 3 questions. Waiting for the government and GOA to succeed in shaming the corrupt offices and corrupt public servants, waiting as well to segregate and stop the commies from multiplying. Okay, ako, I agree with you on all counts, pero I don't call the NPA, CPP, and NDF as communists because I don't even think they're communists anymore. I consider them declared terrorists. So let's make a difference. It's not a crime to be a communist, it's a crime to be a terrorist. So make that distinction. Totoo po ba yung child of the century, sabi ng Marcos, na pagkapanalo ng mga Marcos sa American court? Mga? O ni Mrs. Marcos. Mrs. Marcos was tried in New York for racketeering together with Adnan Khashoggi, supposedly in trafficking guns. So racketeering involved the trafficking of guns. She was acquitted, so was Mr. Khashoggi. Sorry, it's the internet. I don't know what your standards are for calling anything the child of the century. Edgardo Sikat says, thank you for answering logically my question. Nakita ko lang kasi na i-fact check ni Rappler yung video na pinapakalat ng Filipino Future sa YouTube. More power to you. Alright. Okay. As a final note, no, there's certain things we get asked that we normally and routinely ignore because I don't think that there is enough evidence to even comment on things. Now, if the only evidence you have is a YouTube video or series of YouTube videos and there is no support in, for example, when it comes to history or archaeology, ancient history and all of that, please find out if there are academic studies on it. Then you can at least believe in some part of it. Why? Because even discoveries are vetted in an academic setting. Even historical papers are vetted. So, ibig sabihin, tinetesting yan. All of these things are subject to testing. All of these facts are subject to testing. Don't believe things just because you saw it in a YouTube video. Even those that I tell you can be subjected to testing. You can check, for instance, the cases that I talked about here and how they are reported. And you can check also the Supreme Court records if there are any on particular cases that we talk about. If I tell you what the law says, you can also check what the law says. diba? But if there are things there that are said that cannot be checked and do not appear to have any discussions on them outside of the believers or whatever, then you can believe in it simply on faith. But that's faith, huh? Don't impose it on my science. So, I have been repeatedly asked about this series of YouTube videos. I will not dignify it because for me, there is not enough evidence in that, and there is no academic, uh, there's no serious academic study on it. Now, on the Marcos Gold, I have yet to find direct evidence or direct testimony from the people who ought to know, and that's the Marcos family. Now, Mrs. Marcos talks about cash deposits, which is a big difference from having actual gold. Mm, um, that I can believe because the presumption is that she's telling the truth. Later on, if the reason that we want to believe in her is because we want some action to be taken on it, then you're going to need more evidence for that. Diba? Not just her mere say so. Okay? Um, that way, we don't also spread the fake news. We have to test what we are talking about. We have to test what we're going to invest faith in. Di ba? So, yung iba kasi magtatanong sa akin, sasabihin ganito, and relate certain archaeological finds to religion. I study the cultural values of certain diggings and so on. In fact, that is my main track. My main track is cultural archaeology. And that includes religions and other beliefs and all that. But we, you know, we subject each discovery to a battery of reviews and tests. So don't believe anything easily that requires you to invest your faith in it. Ito sabi ni Benedict Corpus, last 3 questions na, nag-like and share na po ba kayo? Oo nga naman, 'di ba? Ayan. Kailangan talaga maibalik ang pagpapahalaga ng kulturang Pilipino para maibalik ang nationalism ng younger generation and the presentation of history without omission of some. Yes. Sana po may proof, ah, hindi lang po hearsay. Oo. Otherwise, we can say na, oh, they told us a story. Whether that is true or not, wag na natin muna i-investa ng paniniwala. Pwede natin sabihin, well, I can believe that, but I can't prove it. Ganon. Wag natin din ipakalat. Ask ko lang po kung alam mo po ba na every time na nagla-live kami sisingit na ads kasi baka di ka binabayaran dyan sa ads na yun sa FB. Well, FB does pay us. Also does YouTube, yes. Thank you very much though. I appreciate the concern. Maraming salamat po. It's not much yung sa Facebook. Konti lang. Kasi nga, hindi maka-decide ang Facebook kung gusto nila kaming pagkakitaan o isuppress. Hindi sila makasiguro. Ang tingin ko, yung ginagawa ng mga fact checkers is para hindi kami kumita sa Facebook. Kumikita naman, but not a lot, not really It's just parang kumbaga pangbili ng mga chocolate ko, ganyan. Pag inipon namin, may lechon de leche na kami. Ganun lang. Just something to make it interesting but ano, not something that you can make a living out of. Ito, Walker says, hindi kaya ni DOH patakbuhin ang departamento niya, baka si SOH. Mahina sa management. Dapat mga scientists dito sa Pinas masuportahan dahil matalino. Not necessarily. Do you know that Secretary William Dar is a scientist? So that's not true. It's not necessarily true. You need persons who can manage, not necessarily scientists, di ba? But we do have very excellent scientists here. 12 years old ako nang manalo si Marcos sa presidente at ma-re-elect siya. Wala akong matandaan about gold. Only 1980 kumalat yan, sabi ni Ma'am Elisa. Yeah, ang daming kinalat. A lot of the myth-making happened towards the end. Posible po ba na ma-endorse ni PRRD si BBM to run for president in 2022? Ba, depende yan kung ano yung usapan nila. Anything is possible. But that would mean that Sarah wouldn't run. Pagka ganon. Yeah, but I think it's possible. But probable, I'm not sure. Uh, Sabi ni Christopher Barton, okay lang sa amin may ads, basta kahit paano, kahit konti, meron po kayo nakuha sa FB tsaka sa YT. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Is FDR still alive? Yes, he is. I'm wondering bakit walang nag interview sa kanya for history and martial law year. Si JPE na lang palagi nagkukwento. I think he's not very well. I think he's okay. I mean, but very very old. So I'm not sure how whether he's still as strong as he was. When Mrs. Shahani, when Senator Shahani died, I did see him there, and he seemed in good health. But I know he's still alive. He just hasn't been seen in public for a while. Red October says, baka yung gold myths ng mga Marcos, fake news ng dilaw noon para gamitin against them. Posible din yun. Or it's possible that some of them were conducting illegal mining of gold and then they wanted to justify it by claiming na, oh, we found the Marcos gold. At saka they could also claim na, oh, hindi, kaya ako yumaman, hindi dahil nagbebenta ako ng droga, pero dahil nakahanap ako ng Marcos gold. Pwedeng ganun, di ba? Or gold, or some kind of gold. It's a way to hide things. Yung mga haka-haka patungkol sa mga Marcoses ay resulta lang yan ng 30 years of mainstream media manipulation. Ayan, sabi ni Ma'am Rosemary, sana sa replay na sila mag-in ng ads, live should not be interrupted. Kaya din siguro nako-congest ang net. Okay. Last na talaga. Oh my gosh, I hope they ask FVR, but di nabigyan si Onyok ng incentives niya. Oo nga eh. I wish he were still, but he's not being seen in public eh. So my guess is that he might not be, feeling very strong right now. Last, yung doctor na sinisiraan niya ang COVID vaccine, pwede ba siyang makasuhan na matanggal ng license niya? Well, yes, that's possible na makasuhan siya sa Professional Regulatory Commission at maaari din siyang kasuhan kung tuloy pa rin yung sa Bayanihan Act. Meron kasing penalties for that eh. If not, pwede pa rin yung administrative. So that's it. Ulitin lang po natin. The Marcos cases, Mrs. Marcos and the Marcos children were acquitted in 2019 for deposits in Security Bank and one other bank. About 200 billion, but they have all been acquitted on that. It's Mrs. Marcos, Senator BBM, Senator Amy, and Miss Irene. All of them were acquitted, plus a few other people. In 2018, Mrs. Marcos was convicted for bank deposits for creating bank accounts in a Swiss bank. And she was convicted for 7 counts of that, but she filed an appeal, and she has filed for bail pending appeal. That is if I'm not mistaken, but I can be corrected on this one, I understand this is one of the last cases that have to be resolved. So she has been acquitted in nearly all criminal cases that have been filed against her, and the Marcos family have been acquitted in most criminal cases against them. I have to check because not all the cases are being reported by mainstream media. So I have to check. But as far as I know, most of their cases have already been resolved in their favor. The remaining cases have already been resolved in their favor. Second, the DJ Loonie case, he was granted bail due to the unreliability of the witness and the failure and then later on was acquitted because of the weakness of the evidence presented by the prosecution. It was very weak because there were no independent witnesses outside of the PNP, and for failure to submit the photographic evidence that they claim existed. Thank you kay Kino for your super sticker. And finally, with Secretary Duque, what he has been given time by the Commission on Audit to comply within so many days. We're not sure kasi hindi nire-report yung time period how long they have to comply with the requirements of COA to complete all of their documents and to explain certain things, including yung dun sa warehousing. So, we're going to have to see if Sec Duque can comply, but if he cannot comply and he cannot explain satisfactorily, then in all likelihood, cases can be filed against him and the president will have to rethink his appointment of Secretary Duque. Thank you kay Ma'am Risa para dun sa pangkape. At thank you kay Kino Kino. Finally, May May says, Justin, Mayor Isko is positive for COVID. I hope that has been announced by him and by regularly announced ha, hindi yung meron binibisto lang natin na may COVID siya. Medical information is private ha. But if it has been announced, then we hope that he gets well soon. We hope that he is asymptomatic. Alright, thank you very much for joining us tonight. May karambola po tayo tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Huwag din po ninyong kakalimutan na mag-like at share dito and follow sa Luminous. Check nyo po kasi minsan na-unfollow kayo sa Luminous sa Facebook page. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're happy to announce we have reached 50,000 subscribers in YouTube. Of 50,000 na lang kulang natin so that we can do an unboxing with YouTube. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Please encourage other people to subscribe also to our YouTube channel. If anything happens to our Facebook page, we will be found there and we will be continually active on our YouTube channel. Maraming salamat and I will see you tomorrow morning on Karambola and on what's this? And on Tambayan. We'll see you then. Bye!